The School Mouse by Dick King Smith. Part 6. Chapter 11, in which Flora takes a journey. Before the others could open their mouths to protest, Flora was gone. Her father, she knew, could not follow her, and Buck, she hoped, would not. What with his poor sight and his sense of smell much less sharp than that of a wild mouse, she shuddered to think what might befall him in the open and broad daylight. Or what might befall me, for that matter, she said to herself. Nevertheless, she pressed bravely on, hoping to sight the straw stack before too long. In fact, she could hardly see beyond the end of her nose, so much had the spring grass grown. What she could do, though, was to hear something. At first, it was just a distant rumble, but quickly it grew louder, until it became a roaring, thundering, deafening noise heading straight for her, while the ground beneath her feet shook. Flora cast a terrified glance behind her to see a huge red monster approaching. Leaping madly away to get out of its path, she came to a bank at the field's edge, a bank in which, she saw, there was a large hole. Flora dived headlong into the hole as the monster went lumbering by. For a long while she crouched there, too frightened to move. Then at last she heard something approaching her from the inside of the burrow in whose mouth she sat, and before she could decide what to do, a large animal appeared. It was large, that is to say, to Flora's eyes, and brown in color, with a furry coat and big liquid eyes, and long ears that stuck up. "What's up then, Mouse?" said the animal. It had two large front teeth, Flora could see, but something told her that it was not dangerous, and she held her ground. "Sorry to intrude," she said, "but I was being chased by a red monster." "Red monster?" said the animal. "What be you then, some kind of town mouse?" "No," said Flora, "I'm a school mouse. And please, what are you?" "You don't know?" "No." "Where you been all your life, mouse?" "In school." "You ain't learned much then. Never seen a rabbit before." Rabbit, thought Flora. Of course, I remember seeing a picture in that very first book I ever looked at. "Only in a book," she said. The rabbit shook his long ears in bewilderment. "You soft in the head, mouse," he said. "All this stuff about school mice and books and red monsters. Anyone would think you ain't never seen a tractor before neither." Tractor, thought Flora. Yes, that was in the book too. "What was it doing?" she asked. "Going down along to the stack," said the rabbit, "to get a trailer load of straw bales." "My mother's living in the stack," Flora said. "Haven't you got no daddy?" the rabbit said. "He's in the school." "They're separated, huh?" "Well, yes, they are, just at the moment," said Flora. "That's why I'm out here, to fetch my mother and my little sister and take them back to the school. They'll be safe there, I hope. And anyway, I want them to meet my boyfriend. He's called Buck." "Buck," said the rabbit. "You got a rabbit for a boyfriend?" No, he's a mouse. He's ever so handsome. He's pure white, you know, snowy white, and he's got beautiful pink eyes." "And 6 legs and a pair of dear little wings, I suppose," said the rabbit. "I gotta hand it to you, mouse. You're the craziest. I don't know about school mice. Seems to me 'tis more fool mouse." And with those parting words he turned and disappeared down his burrow. Meanwhile, down in the haystack, Hyacinth and Love in a Mist were unworried at the sound of the tractor's approach. They had grown used to its regular visits to collect a load of straw. What they had not bargained for was that one day, as the stack diminished in size, they might become part of the load. That morning it so happened that they had made their way to the very edge of the stack to watch out for Ragged Robin returning, when the tractor driver began to load his trailer. "Dratted mice," he said, as he lifted a bale and found 2 of the creatures hiding beneath it. But before he could do anything, they had leaped onto the bed of the trailer and hidden themselves among the bells already there. When the tractor returned across the field with its load, Flora had been on the point of leaving the shelter of the rabbit's burrow. But hearing it approach, she forced herself to observe it carefully as it went by. It is all part of my education, she told herself, to learn about such things. She noted the features of the great red monsters, its driver perched high in his cab, and she ran her eye down the load of straw bales. Suddenly she saw right at the bottom of the load 2 anxious faces peeping out between a couple of bales on the bed. One, a small one, she did not recognize. The other she did. "Mother!" yelled Flora at the top of her voice, and she ran out of the rabbit hole and scuttled along beside the tractor. "It's our Flora," said Hyacinth to Love in a Mist. "Jump, Mother, jump!" cried Flora. "Jump, Lovely," said Hyacinth. "But, Mom," said Love in a Mist. "No buts," said Hyacinth. For a mouse, a leap from such a height is the equivalent of a man plunging off the top of a tall building. But mice fall light, and the lush grass cushioned their landing so that they bounced unhurt. "Flora," said Hyacinth, "what are you doing out here?" "Come to fetch you, Mother," said Flora. "But why did your father not come back? I told him to." "Is Daddy all right?" said Love in a Mist. "You must be Love in a Mist," said Flora. "You have got a long name, haven't you?" "Mom usually calls me Lovey." "Come on then, Lovey," said Flora. "We must all hurry back to school, and then I can explain everything." "Are you still in kindergarten?" asked Hyacinth when they arrived at school. "Oh, no, Mother," said Flora. "I'm a first grader now," and she led the way to her classroom. In her absence, Ragged Robin and Buck had spent their time in conversation. Buck was feeling guilty at having wounded Flora's father, and Robin was touched at his obvious concern. "Don't worry, my boy," he said. "Least said, soonest mended." But in fact, they said a great deal to one another. Robin wanted to know all about pet mice, and Buck about school mice. "It's this reading business that amazes me, Robin," he said. "I don't know how Flora does it. And she can count to 31, whatever that means. And she knows a fantastic lot of things. Education, she calls it. I don't even know what the word means." "Me neither, Buck," said Robin. "I've been a school mouse all my life, but you couldn't count the things I know on the toes of one foot." "Speaking of feet," Buck said, "you should be resting yours. Why not come on down to my place? You'll find it quite comfy." So off they went to the first grade classroom, and Robin followed Buck down the hole beneath the sink. It was indeed a comfortable den, for Buck had pulled a good deal of the insulation off the water pipes, and the 2 mice took their ease on the most comfortable of thick beds of yellow felt. The time passed pleasantly as they chatted, and then at last they heard voices above. "They're here," said Robin, and he made his way up through the hole in the floorboards and limped 3-legged towards his wife. "Hyce, my dear," he cried. "You're back." Hyacinth regarded her scruffy husband with a stern eye. "You've been fighting," she said. "Well, yes," said Robin. "How could you? You were too old for such behavior." "Well, yes," said Robin. "You started it, I've no doubt. You went and picked a fight with someone." "Well, no," said Robin. "And now you've got hurt. Why can't you act your age?" "But Hyce," said Robin. "I'd just like to get hold of the mouse that did it," said Hyacinth. "But Mother," said Flora. "No buts," said Hyacinth. At this point Buck emerged from the hole. He looked, as usual, beautifully groomed with not a hair out of place. His white coat gleamed, his whiskers were neatly combed. He lowered the gaze of his pink eyes before Hyacinth's astonished stare. "I'm sorry," he said. "I am the mouse that did it." For an instant Hyacinth stood stock still. Then she leaped at Buck and fastened her needle-sharp teeth in the end of his nose. Chapter 12, in which Hyacinth makes an apology. "Your Bommy," said Buck that night, "is a fierce bouse." Flora licked his swollen snout tenderly. I'm sorry, she said. It all happened so quickly. I had no time to explain. She's bade her best and bide doze, said Buck. Lie down and rest, said Flora, arranging the felt bedding more comfortably around him. I expect she'll say sorry in her own good time. But Hyacinth was in no mood for apologies. That great white monstrosity of a mouse had bitten her poor little husband, so she had responded in kind. A nose for a foot and a tooth for a tooth, she said to Robin back in their old nest under the staff room floor. He certainly clobbered me, Heis, said Robin. His feelings were muddled. He felt sorry for his new friend, and at the same time pleased that his wife had sprung to avenge his injury. You won't do it again, though, will you? He said, now that everything has been explained. I mean, he is one of the family now. Hyacinth did not answer. I wish I had a boyfriend, said Lovey. You are much too young, said her mother. Why, it seems only yesterday that you were born here, in this very spot. Buck's place is nice, said Robin. It's much roomier than this, and ever so well furnished. Why don't we move in with him and Flora? What do you say, Heis? But once again Hyacinth did not answer, and Robin knew better than to nag her. As the next evening approached, only one of the 5 mice in the school had had a good day's sleep, and that was Lovey. Ragged Robin's foot and Buck's nose allowed them no more than a fitful doze, and Flora and Hyacinth were deep in thought. Each had a problem. Under the boards in the staff room, Hyacinth now wrestled with her conscience. Should she say she was sorry? She wasn't. Sorry, but should she say she was? How could she move in with Flora and Buck unless she did say so? What should she do? Under the sink in the first-grade classroom, Flora fretted about her future. I shouldn't be here, she said to herself. Spring vacation will soon be over, and it's time I became a second grader. I'm sure I could cope with the work. I want to move up, but I don't want to move house. What shall I do? As the light faded, Flora's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of Lovey. There's a meeting, Flora, she said, in the staff room. Now, Mommy says. And away she went. Flora and Buck made their way to the staff room, and as soon as they entered, Robin greeted them heartily. Flora, dear, he cried. Buck, my boy, how are you feeling? Much better, thank you, Robin, said Buck. How about you? Oh, I'm on the mend, said Robin. Plenty of life in the old mouse yet. An awkward silence followed. Neither of the male mice could think of anything further to say, and Flora's feelings towards her mother were less than kindly. She summoned us here, she thought, so let her get on with it. After a while, Hyacinth spoke. Flora, she said heavily, I owe you an apology. Me, mother, said Flora, looking sideways at Buck's nose. Yes, said Hyacinth. I was hasty. I did not realize that this person... Buck, said Flora. His name is Buck. That Buck was a friend of yours. It's not me you should be apologizing to, mother, said Flora. But, began Hyacinth. No buts, said Flora, in so Hyacinth-like a way that Robin was filled with delight. If a mouse could wag its tail like a dog, he'd have wagged his if he'd had one. After all, said Flora, if we are all to live together as one happy family, we don't want any more bad blood. Or any more good blood, said Robin. Well, that was really why I called this meeting, said Hyacinth hastily, to see if you wouldn't be willing, you and Buck, that is, for your father and Lovey and me to share your accommodation. It's very comfortable and roomy, I hear, and it would be nice to be all together, wouldn't it? On one condition, mother, said Flora firmly. What's that? Say you're sorry to Buck. It doesn't matter. Least said, soonest bended, Robin? Robin did not answer. Go on, Heis, he thought. Say it, even if you don't mean it. It'll do me a power of good to hear you eating humble pie. Hyacinth looked at the white mouse's still swollen snout. She took a deep breath. Buck, she said, I am sorry that I bit your nose." And to her surprise, she found she meant it. "Don't mention it," said Buck. "Good old Heist," said Robin. "Let's all go to our place," said Flora. "Yippee!" cried Lovey, and away they went. The last few days of spring vacation slipped by pleasantly enough, but Robin's and Buck's injuries healed well, and the White Mouse found himself thoroughly accepted by Flora's family. He and Robin were already firm friends, and for the little Lovey he was the perfect big brother. The way to Hyacinth's heart, he found, was flattery. Accustomed as she was to nothing better than such compliments as "good old Hys," she was delighted when, for instance, Buck passed a remark on the beauty of her eyes. "Oh, the depth of blackness in those shining orbs, Hyacinth," he murmured, fixing her with his pink ones, and she bridled with pleasure. Only Flora was restless. As the end of spring vacation drew near, she haunted the second-grade classroom. She was determined to move up a grade. Yet she did not want to leave the comfortable home under the first-grade sink. Then, on the very last day of vacation, she found a solution. The second-grade classroom was by far the biggest in the school, and one end of it had been set aside as a library area. Here were not only well-stocked bookshelves, but also a large table on which various books of interest were always left open to encourage children to look through them. There were atlases and dictionaries and encyclopedias and many others. Flora was standing in front of one of these, polishing up her reading skills, ready for school to begin again. It was an illustrated dictionary, open at pages dealing with the letter C. The picture was of a man in a suit, carrying a rolled umbrella and a briefcase, and in the act of stepping into a railway carriage. It meant nothing to Flora, but she read the words beneath. Commuter. One who travels daily from home to place of work, returning home at the end of the day. Place of work, thought Flora. Well, for me that now means the classroom, so I won't have to leave home. I can commute to work and back each day.